touching account in India of Asanbi, a lady who was converted from Muslims in India. And I think that in that church body, our sister church there, they at one time said they had 27 converted pastors who were Muslim. And so that's wonderful to see. We did not see that in Nigeria and in Tanzania. There have been serious problems. One of our pastors there, they tried to assassinate him. We did have one convert there, Pastor King Gomella. He was a converted Muslim, so you can read about those in that you have here. I just wanted to go last over the idea of Sharia because it touches in on what we're talking about, totality. And I'll give you the example where the rubber meets the road. In northern Nigeria, the Muslims dominate. In southern Nigeria, the Christians live there. So in northern Nigeria, the state legislatures passed the Sharia law. And that meant that anybody there, whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, or an animist, you had to abide by the Sharia law. Now that's very significant because the Sharia law follows the Quran and the Hadith. And while we in the United States talk about a judicial system, remember that according to Sharia, they have imams, who will go ahead and explain how things are supposed to be interpreted and carried out. Here's one example out of everyday life in northern Nigeria. So the Sharia was passed, an imam gave his pronouncement upon how it's supposed to be enforced with regard to motorcycles. So in Nigeria, a lot of travel is by motorcycle. You go on the back of a man who has a motorcycle, you pay him, he delivers you. Under Sharia there, they said no woman can ride on the back of a motorcycle and touch a man unless, of course, she is married to him. That's one of the little things, but it's not a little thing when you're making your money transporting people to different places. Another thing about northern Nigeria is that when you're living under Sharia, the rules and regulations are very difficult for Christians. This is historically correct. There's something called the jizya that has to be paid by Christians, anybody else living under Sharia law, if you don't convert. That means you pay a tax that the Muslims do not pay, okay? But it's even worse than that. In northern Nigeria consistently, and you have a little diagram there of where the Fulani tribe is. The Fulani tribe stretches across Nigeria, also in other countries around there. They're a very big tribe, but they also are allied with the Hausa, and the Hausa Fulani control the north. And so when I lived there, we would get reports in the newspapers about churches being burned in the north because, of course, they want total submission. You don't submit, well, then you're out of line. And the reports would be like, 30, 40 churches burned, 2 mosques attacked. That's that's what you'd read, that's what you'd hear. And also the Fulanis are cattlemen, and many of the Christians who lived in certain areas in the north, they were farmers. And so the Fulanis, this is their land. They would drive their cattle right through your crops and destroy your crops. So that's some of the things that they faced when the Muslims had total control. First of all, of course, are the killings. And remember that Boko Haram is not all there is that's there. Boko Haram stretches from northern Nigeria. They have influence there with their people over to the Cameroons. But you look at the Fulani tribe, you remember that they're far more than just Boko Haram. One time when we were there, again, the Christians did not respond in like kind most of the time. Okay, but one time when we were there, a train came down from the north to one of our large cities in the south loaded with corpses. When that train arrived at the railway depot, the Christians looked at that and they hunted around town for any Muslims who were there and they killed them. Well, that was wrong. But, I hate to say it, but it wouldn't have happened had they not been killing them up in the north, So what we face in many situations is that they want to rule, period, and if you don't submit, then there's a jizya, or perhaps there's your crops being trampled, or perhaps you're going to have to face even worse than that. That's not the United States, though, is it? You see, it's different in our country because we have a Western culture. We have a law that laws of the land. We have a constitution, and so on. But you see, you don't have that under Sharia. It would not be that way under Sharia. When I lived on the reservation in South Dakota, you had 2 jurisdictions. Okay, you had the tribal jurisdiction that existed on the tribal lands. All right. Then you had the county. Okay, so you had Todd County. The police from Todd County, the sheriff and that. But the sheriff could not go over into the tribal land and arrest somebody. He had to go and talk to the tribal constables and so on. Well, okay, they worked that out down through the years, but you don't have that with Sharia. See, there's no dual jurisdiction, there's no shared jurisdiction. Under Sharia, and that's again that totality that you see, there's total rule and you must submit, period. So you have in your packet there one last sheet that you can look at. There are references from the Quran that you can look at. If you can download the Quran, you can look at that in English. Also, if you have some friends who are Muslim and who know Arabic, there is also reference there. You can get online, I'm sorry, not buy, you can get a free Arabic translation of the New Testament, free, okay? So the Quran you can download free, and with the Run resource there, you can actually get a New Testament Arabic you can give to somebody. So thank you very much. If you have any no questions, then off we go.
Any questions?
Well, thank you.
I've got one myself. You were talking about something on page 7, and I just wasn't sure what you were referring to. So it was the one you said, "Don't laugh." On bottom right on page 7, Jesus was a man and a worshiper of Allah, and you said that he didn't do that miracle when he was a baby. Is there some context that I don't know? Like, what miracle is that referring to?
That the baby talked.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So they're saying that that was a miracle of Jesus, that as a baby he talked.
Well, I don't know if they say it's a miracle, but they say he talked.
Okay.
But that's not one of the miracles our Lord performed.
Right. Well, nor does anything like that is recorded in the Bible until he's 12, right?
And that's interesting too. Don't just go, when you're investigating Islam, don't just go by what Christian material says. You know, you can go to other sources too. Honest historical evidence, honest geographical, archaeological studies that are not Christian painted, you know, and you can see the truth there. Just like with regard to the crucifixion. Greek, Jewish, and Roman authorities all say Jesus was crucified at that place at that time. Okay, well, thank you.
Sorry, I have another one.
Oh, okay.
So you were talking about the oral tradition in Islam and how it wasn't written down until afterwards. And I'm wondering, you know, when we talk about it, when we talk about the Bible, right, we're like secular scholars claim that that's what happened with the Bible. And we know that's not true. It was written by men, but we also would say it was written by the men who were involved, the apostles, after Jesus' ascension, and that they were inspired. So if somebody were to claim, well, you know, how can you trust that? These were men, they wouldn't remember that. And we'd say, well, they were inspired by God. What do they claim about the Quran in terms of inspiration? Is it the same sort of claim or different in some way?
Well, just go back to the New Testament. We have 5,700 manuscripts and parts of manuscripts at this time, and they're still finding more.
Yeah.
And all of those manuscripts corroborate what we have in the Greek New Testament. The only variations are you have the, and you maybe have one letter change there. You have an eta or an alpha. That's all. The only changes. But in the Quran, you don't have anything like that. At one point, I think that I read, don't quote me on this, but I think there are 30 different Qurans today around.
You mean Arabic Qurans?
I think so,
Okay.
but don't quote me. But the point is with the Quran, remember that 2 years after he died, a Quran was put down in Arabic, then 20 years later another. But the previous ones were burned. That was a practice. And nothing like that in the New Testament. You know, in the Old Testament, that the Hebrew is exact because the transcribers, remember, the Katib and the Karev, you know, they would allow that somebody maybe had made a mistake in a text with a word, but you would not say that word. You would say what the truth was, but that was written in the text. They wouldn't vary it. You know, you don't have that with the Quran. You have all these variations and alterations, and it's just, again, they say it's directly from God, but this can't be.
So do they would claim inspiration the same way we would? Or is it a different kind of
They
idea?
say it replaces the Old New Testament
Okay, yeah.
from Allah.
Yeah.
I have a hard time understanding the draw to the Muslim faith, and I would like your take on your experience and all your travel, I mean, I've heard others, what draws anybody to the Muslim faith?
Well, if you're a man, it will appeal to you. Because if you go to heaven and you have these white pearls and you have all that in heaven, that's something to look forward to. Also, it appeals to a very hardened masculinity. They rule. And so if you look at that, you look in the Quran, you see that a wife can be beaten. She can be beaten. And you look in the Quran and it says that when you have a witness in a court, okay, 2 women can testify or 1 man. In other words, the man's testimony is more important than, 1 woman. You have to have 2. And you start to see that. So definitely there's an appeal to masculinity, there's an appeal to the man, and then the whole idea of fear. And, they're going to a lot of ignorant people. They're going to, where they are prospering for the most part, they're going to a lot of ignorant people, and they're teaching them things and saying to them things that they accept, but then there also is that fear. Well, you look at the Fulani tribe in the north. They're compelling people. Let's go back to, in the United States, look back to one example of Muhammad Ali. Okay, so Cassius Clay said, and this then impinges upon the black population, I think, because we know that there's been conversion to Muslim. So he said that he didn't want to be named after Clay because, of course, there was racism there. Well, Muhammad Ali was somewhat ignorant of who he was really talking about and who he was named after, because that man was a man who was a struggler for civil rights. But he said, I'm going to name it after Muhammad, and he named himself Muhammad Ali. Well, Muhammad in the Quran endorses slavery. It's endorsed in the Quran. And Ali was his son, and he also endorsed slavery. So there's ignorance there. But it appealed because the Muslims were saying, you've been put upon by the white people. Here, we give you a situation where you can raise yourself up and you can be respected and so on, honored. And so in our country, at least I think, among the black people, because of what they're saying, they're preying upon a persecution complex, they're preying upon past grievances. And that's also something about Islam, is they prey upon past grievances, saying that the Crusades were totally wicked against them, which is not true. So I think that's, in our country at least, we see that. That's the best I can tell you. In India, they conquered, remember when they came into India, the Mughals, they came down about the Middle Ages, and they came down and they conquered everything up to a certain point. And then you had the southern people, the very dark-skinned people who were still there. But it was all by conquering. And still today, in India, it's a matter of fear, I think. And then good works. That's the other religion in the world, other than Christianity, is good works. Well, if I can do enough good to outweigh the bad, well then Allah will be pleased with me. As little Jack Horner sat in a corner, stuck in his thumb and pulled out a plum and said, what a good boy am I. Well, that's what that religion is. And that appeals to a lot of people. A lot of people. Yeah?
In your estimation, when you've seen Muslims be converted to Christianity, what is the reason why they do that?
Well, in going through the internet and preparing for this and looking at and hearing some of the fellows who were converts, they started to investigate the Quran. They started to look at some of these things and they said, well, this is preposterous. This isn't, what is this? One man who was a convert, he was raised in Germany, and he knew how the Christians treated people in Germany. Then his parents took him back to Turkey, and he saw the contrast. And so that repelled him, so he left Islam. And I think that also, if they can see the contrast, if they can really see it, that really helps. But again, there is a lot of cultural rule. You don't convert, you could be killed, because that's what the Quran says, of course. If you convert, you can be killed.
If you don't convert.
If you convert, you can be killed.
Oh, if you convert to Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some logical, but also some seeing other Christians how they act.
And that's the key. We show love to them. And that's what Famer did, that's what Raymond Lull did, and that's what we have to do. And the consequences may be that the Christians suffer for it, but still, that's what Christ tells us to do. And we want to do it, period.
I would imagine too. I mean, when you describe grace, does that really strike them? You know, because I've read that you touched on it there too, that you know, in the Quran there is no grace. That Allah is rather capricious. Like
That's a good term.
He'll forgive somebody here or there, but not this person, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, which would I guess it would keep you on your toes with that fear.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Whereas grace really gives stability and confidence and comfort. Is that something that when somebody comes to understand that, that would really, I think, would make an impact on
I
others?
think so, definitely. And that's a good point. You mentioned that Allah, I've used that too. He is capricious. This is going back to Mount Olympus with the Greek gods. Look how capricious they were. You know, and that's the way Allah is, although, you know, Muslims would really be upset with you saying that. But it's according to His will. And Allah also holds to, Allah is a good Calvinist. Allah predestines to heaven, and He predestines to hell. And you investigate that in the Quran, that says that too. You know, it's horrible. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.